On July 23, 2016, President Rodrigo Duterte signed Executive Order Number 02, or the Freedom of Information Program. It requires that all executive departments, agencies, bureaus, and offices disclose public records, contracts, transactions, and any information requested by a member of the public, except for matters affecting national security. Welcome to Data Ethics Conversations. Today, we talk to Kris Ablan, Undersecretary for Finance, Legislative Affairs, and Freedom of Information. Usec Ablan is a lawyer by profession and currently represents the country at the International Conference of Information Commissioners, or ICIC. We will talk to Kris about the origins and backgrounds of the FOI program, defining open data versus freedom of information, and the progress and achievements of the FOI program to date. If you enjoy this podcast, please like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at EthicsPH, and on LinkedIn at DataEthicsPH. And now, my conversation with Usec Kris Ablan.
Hi, good evening, Doc. Thank you so much for having me in your podcast. No, it is an honor and a pleasure, no, to be able to discuss freedom of information as it relates to data ethics this evening. So yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, the honor is ours, no? So anyway, I won't hold you back from your material. But maybe before you start, I'm sure a lot of people already know you who are watching now, no? But for the few people who don't, maybe a brief background and then, take it away, no?
Sure. Thanks, Doc. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kris Ablan. I work at the Presidential Communications Operations Office, which is a department level agency. In other countries, it's known as the Department of Public Information or the Ministry of Public Information. Right now, because of an order coming from the Office of the Executive Secretary, we also run and manage the Freedom of Information program. And let me turn to the next slide to show you what the relevance or what we want to push as the relevance of freedom of information to data ethics. So when you ask a person what freedom of information is, the usual answer is that FOI is for transparency. It is an accountability tool used by civil society to put their government in check by asking them, where do taxpayers' monies go to? Do they really fund public projects? But what I'd like to share to all of our data ethics viewers this evening is that freedom of information is more than that. Freedom of information can also be used to fight fake news. Right now, you watch a lot of things on YouTube and on television. You also read a lot of things on social media. And sometimes, because of the quickness of the news, we don't know already what is the truth from the false. And that's where FOI can come in. If the information you read or watch or hear about concerns government information, you can use freedom of information to ask for the government stand. FOI can also be used for academic research. Now, government is a rich source of information. We have over 300 kinds of information last time that we checked. And a lot of you who are doing your PhDs, doing your thesis, your dissertation, and you need government data, you can actually access government data to compare with your studies. And you can get this from agencies such as the Philippine Statistics Authority or PSA, from NEDA, from DOLE, from the Department of Health, and what have you. So you can use it for your research. And this is where FOI can come in terms of data ethics, no, and data science. FOI can be used for innovation. So aside from getting contracts, legal documents, copies of rules, and whatnot, you can actually also request for data sets, no, from government. No, government collects a lot of data about you regarding your health. regarding your financial status, regarding your social status. And that data can actually be used to develop the next generation of applications. I mean, in other countries like South Korea, they've used FOI to get geo maps, no, and then intertwine the geo maps with other data to come up with the next tourist map application, and that can be done. And hopefully, with my introduction and opportunity here in Data Ethics PH, it provides an avenue for me to discuss now with data scientists and data stewards that there is this whole realm in government that you can access to develop the next generation of applications. And finally, I'll just touch on this briefly. Freedom of information can also be used for empowerment. A lot of information in government relate to government financial assistance and other forms of support. And before freedom of information, this information is usually confined to those who know the information. There is what we call information asymmetry. And I hope it's all right to speak in the vernacular, Doc, no? But minsan, no, ang nakakaalam lang ng ayuda, no, ng government financial assistance are the relatives and friends of those in government. And freedom of information is there to level the playing field, to ensure that everyone has this opportunity to find out if there is assistance for a small business like myself. And you can use this, and you can use FOI to get that information. So there are many uses to FOI. It's not just for transparency, although it was all based on transparency, but it's now used to fight fake news, to enrich academic research, to have innovation, and for empowerment. So I think I went ahead of myself. Now let's go back to the basics. Next slide, please. I'm joined tonight, no, by my colleague at the Freedom of Information Project Management Office, Ella. She's not shown on the screen, but she's there. She's the one operating the slide deck. Um, we have Executive Order number 2 series of 2016, signed by the President back in July 23, 2016, which operationalizes the constitutional right. So a bit of segue, the right to information is actually enshrined in our Constitution. It is Section 7, Article 3. And it's based on, concepts that have been there since the U.S. Revolution. James Madison already assured every American, no, the right to access government information. The U.S. formalized this in 1966. Majority of modern democracies passed their FOI laws between 1980 to the 2000s. Tayo na lang wala pa. So President Duterte could not wait for the Congress to sign it into law. So he signed Executive Order number 2, which created more or less this program. Next slide. What does the program say? It says every Filipino shall have access to information, official records, public records, and to documents and papers pertaining to official acts, transactions, or decisions, as well as to government research data as basis for policy development. So what's the basis? Aside from the constitutional basis, what is the practical basis? The practical basis is the information that government collects comes from taxpayers' money. When the PSA conducts surveys, when the DOLE conducts data collection, all of those practices and activities come from public monies. You fund for that. And therefore, based on that, you have the right to access the information. Next slide. So what does information encapsulate, no, and cover? It does not pertain just to documents. And so I'm trying to talk to data stewards and data scientists here who think that FOI only concerns documents, republic acts, and executive orders. It covers a wide range of information. It covers documents, but it also covers audio-visual presentation. It covers recordings. It covers maps, photographs, data research materials, and data sets, and also in electronic form. So whatever government collects, as long as it does not fall on
out later that there are exceptions. Sorry for the mute. And I'll explain later what those are. Next slide. Okay. Coverage. It does not cover the judicial branch, which are our courts, and it also does not cover our legislative branch, which is our House of Representatives and the Senate. It covers the executive branch, but let me tell you that it covers a lot of offices already. Executive branch has almost 200 national government agencies, and we're talking about DOST, DOST Picture, DOST Picard, PSA, DOH, FDA, covers a lot of national government agencies. It also covers the more than 100 GOCCs that we have, like PhilHealth, SSS, GSIS, and also the state universities and colleges like UP Diliman, Mindanao State University, Cavite State University, and even local water districts like Davao City Water District, Zamboanga Water District. So we're talking about 1,000 government offices, give or take. Next slide. The FOI program has two ways. No, the way it was conceptualized 5 years ago, you actually have to go to a government office, fill out a form, and submit it to the information officer, who then processes it. But you know, we live in the 21st century, so all things have to be online. And so we developed a website, foi.gov.ph, and you can already access information from the comforts of your own home. More on that later. Next slide. What are the requirements now if you want to request for information or a data set? We only require a government issued ID. We require a government issued ID to lower the number of vexatious requests or requests that are meant to harass, and as well as to prove that the requester is a Filipino citizen, given that this is a constitutional right of Filipino citizens. So how much does it cost to ask? It is free. No? So if you request for information, the act of requesting is free. But government agencies do impose reasonable fees for photocopying, printing the information. So if you give your USB, or if it's shared electronically, that should be free. But if it's hard copies, the reasonable fees range anywhere between 1 pesos to 5 pesos per page. Next slide. This is the process flow, Doc, and everyone. What is you are on the left. You're a citizen. You request it, and it's received by a receiving officer. The receiving officer conducts an evaluation, make sure that the information is in the agency, or that you've filled in the application form properly. Afterwards, the receiving officer submits it to a decision maker, who approves or denies the request. If the decision maker approves the request, then they will attach the information that you are requesting, and the receiving officer will then have to contact you and tells you that the request was approved, and shares to you the information. The decision maker can deny the request. No, not all requests are approved. The decision maker can deny for 3 reasons. Number 1, if the information is not with the agency. Okay, so the agency cannot give what it does not have. And number 2, if the information falls under any of the exceptions, and more on that later. So dalawa lang pala yung rason. Or number 3, if you did not fill out the application form properly, it will be returned to you. Or if you lack, for example, you request for data sets regarding number of pregnancies between teenagers for region 1, and you don't put a period, that request will be returned to you because there has to be a period. No? So you have to say, okay, between 2016 and 2020, then that will be processed. So those are the 3 ways wherein a request will be returned to you. Next slide. How long does it take? Based on our executive order, it takes 15 working days. That's around 3 weeks. And I know it might be too long for lots of millennials and Generation Z and Generation Alpha out there who are accustomed to instant everything. But I'm pleased to share with you that agencies have been able to respond quickly and faster. No, next slide. On the average, no, agencies are able to respond within 7 working days or more or less a week. You have actually agencies such as the Philippine Statistics Authority, DOC, and everyone else that are able to respond within the day. especially if the data set is already available online. You ask for, let's say, a data set regarding poverty statistics or labor statistics at this time in the morning. By the afternoon, you will get the response and the hyperlink to the data set you are requesting. Next slide. What happens if an agency does not respond or denies a request that you should be actually getting? The responsible officer actually gets reprimanded the first time. Second time, he gets suspended. And the third time, he gets dismissed from the service. So may mga administrative liabilities yan. So our policy, guys, is to disclose. No? So we adopt a policy to disclose to everyone. And only not disclose if the information involved falls under any of the exceptions. Hold on, let me put on my...
Okay, Doc and everyone, I will show you our information disclosure. Many of you, well, some of you would say there's no need for freedom of information because government actually proactively discloses. That's true, no? And we do have what we call proactive disclosure. And on the left, you can see the different initiatives, transparency and proactive initiatives of government. You have the full disclosure policy of the DILG, which requires LGUs to disclose where they use their budgets. You have DevLive, which is an application wherein citizens can monitor, small ticket infrastructure projects like water systems. Under the DBM, they have the transparency seal. You go to any government website, you click on the transparency seal, and you can see all the financial documents of agencies. They also have Project Dime, which is a monitoring tool for big ticket infrastructure projects. It's under dime.dbm.gov.ph, and you can actually monitor the progress of a lot of the big ticket items such as bridges, roads, construction of hospitals and schools under Project Time. And under the DICT, you have the open data. So what use is freedom of information if there's already proactive disclosure? Well, the use of reactive disclosure is, of course, there are many items that the agencies will still not proactively disclose. And that's where reactive disclosure comes in. It's some sort of a backup. No? So you do try, we do encourage people to use proactive disclosure first. No? Check the transparency seals. Check open data for the data sets you're requesting. Only if it's not there, that's when you use freedom of information. If you actually check transparency seals, sometimes the data sets or the documents over there are 3 years old. So that's where freedom of information comes in. You can ask, for example, NEDA, sometimes the data there is 2017, 2018 pa. So you can ask NEDA, oh, I want the latest one. And NEDA will disclose it to you. So that's where freedom of information comes in. So proactive disclosure and reactive disclosure actually help each other out, guys. So in reactive disclosure, we collect, kasi proactive disclosure is what government thinks is relevant to you. But sometimes not everything that government thinks is what actually you want. And that's where FOI comes in. Reactive disclosure is a learning tool for government to find out what sorts of information do citizens really want. And we have done this practice for the past 4 years, Doc, no? We actually submit to the agencies yearly what are the top 5 information that people are requesting. So for example, for 2020, a lot of people were asking about requirements to avail of SAP, ACAP, and other government assistance programs. So we report that to DOLE and tell them that, you have to proactively disclose this particular information. So reactive disclosure is a learning mechanism for proactive disclosure. So once government agencies know what information is relevant, they won't wait for you to ask anymore, and they will proactively disclose it. So it's like a circle. No? Reactive disclosure will feed into proactive disclosure, and proactive disclosure will also help reactive disclosure. So that is our information disclosure diagram. Next slide. Okay, now we go through FOI exceptions. No? So freedom of information across the globe is not absolute. There is no country
that implements access to information, FOI, or right to information with no exceptions. There are exceptions. And here in the Philippines, more or less, we have 9 exceptions. And compared to other countries, we also have similar number. No? The US also has around 10, Australia, the UK, more or less the same number. We only differ in a few exceptions, but there are universal exceptions, and I will be discussing, due to lack of time, only 3 exceptions or 2 exceptions this evening. Okay, so you can screen cap it on your screen, or we can discuss it later on during the Q&A. Next slide. Okay, the first important exception is information covered by executive privilege. No? So this involves presidential conversations between the president and his close advisors, like the cabinet secretaries. And also executive privilege covers deliberative process, privilege such as advisory opinions, recommendations, and draft decisions. So let me focus on deliberative process privilege. If you are requesting for draft decisions, for example, I heard about PSA, drafting this new set of rules. I heard PSA collected this new kind of data. Can I get the draft so that I can use it for my research? Government cannot disclose it to you guys because it's not yet final. Meaning to say, it can change. And government cannot be held accountable if we disclose the draft decision or the draft data set, and then later on turns out that we will be giving something else. We will be put in a hot spot. So until it's final, government cannot disclose the information. Let me bring up something that's most relevant. For example, a couple of weeks ago, which is the vaccines. No? And a lot of people were asking the DOH for details on the vaccines, and they could not disclose it because the procurement for the vaccines was not final. Now that more or less the FDA has approved Sinovac, as well as AstraZeneca, then you can start requesting the same information that was denied back in January, this month of April, because the FDA already has a final decision. So those types of things, no? It's important. If it's still a draft and not yet signed, more or less it will not be disclosed to you guys, because government cannot be put in a hot spot once the final decision is made and it's a different output. Next slide. We have national security. So information that must be kept secret in the interest of national security. So more or less this refers to information about our soldiers and our national secrets. So for example, you cannot request from the AFP or the DND. You can request for data sets of the number of manpower the AFP has, but you cannot request for location of where our soldiers are, simply because disclosure of such information may put the lives of our soldiers and policemen in danger. So that's the national security exception. But sometimes this exception is abused by our government agencies, so you can actually appeal. If the national security exception is used and you disagree with the use of such exception, you actually can file for an appeal. And we can assist you there. No? Sometimes kasi our government agencies, because they're very overprotective, can use this national security as an exception. Next slide. This is another important slide, no? Data privacy. And I know a lot of our data stewards here are, other than being information officers, they are also the data protection officers of their companies and their government agencies. And let me tell you that freedom of information respects and can coexist with data privacy. Okay, what data privacy seeks to protect are personal information of individuals, and they can actually, and FOI is actually more than personal information. So when the information involved relates to personal information, you can be assured that that personal information will not be disclosed. For example, information regarding HIV statistics
can be disclosed using FOI. No, we can use freedom of information to find out where is the concentration in our country of HIV infections. Is it in region 7, region 6? And therefore, that can be used for better policy making. Diba? When making up our budgets, we can focus our attention on region 6 or Central Visayas. This is just hypothetical, guys. Don't quote me on this. But can you ask for the names of those with HIV in region 6 and region 7? Of course not. No. Because we respect data privacy, and disclosure of such information may ostracize, no, our fellow Filipino citizens. And so that's how we balance more or less the right to information and the right to privacy. So those are the 3 exceptions that I would like to focus this evening. For more on this, if you're interested later on, no, if you don't mind, Doc, no, I will be telling our viewers about our FOI 101 online course on
Yes, by all
Smart
means, by all means.
Next slide. Okay, these are just FOI program implementation updates for all of our friends here on Data Ethics PH. This is our website, guys. It is created to be like a Google for government, and it is a public site. And it's foi.gov.ph. And we adopted the policy of disclose to one, disclose to all. And what that means is if you've requested for information in the past, that request is actually visible to other people. Because we learned that what interests John is also what interests Mark. No? So instead of having to go through the same motion, we actually feel that it's better for government if we just disclose it. Kesa naman we process the same kind of request over and over again. And 2020 reveals this thing. A lot of people were asking about the SAP and the ACAP and the CAMP. And instead of DOLE keeping on processing the same request, we just they just published it here. And before you ask, we actually advise you to type in, some keywords. So if you request for HIV statistics, just type it on the search tool, and the results will reveal all of the HIV statistics requests in the past. And who knows, you may not need to wait for 15 working days, Doc. The question has already been asked and answered already. But if you don't see it, that's when you ask. So that's another tip coming from us. So again, it is a public site, no? So please don't use the website as a dating service or to converse with the FOI officer who happens to be your friend, no? Because that happened back in 2016. Next slide. We have 520 agencies on board. So all departments are there. Not yet DSHUD, no? DICT is there, DepEd is there, DOLE is there, DNR, DA, DAR, PCO is there. The old offices, no, of DSHUD is there, HELURB and HUDC, and we're now in the process of converting that to DSHUD, which is the Department of Housing. Next slide. These are the total number of requests. So on the left side, you see almost 30,000 paper-based, but this is 2019 data, guys. So this can be more. Well, we actually haven't, because of the pandemic and the skeletal workforce, haven't gotten the agencies to report the latest on paper-based. But electronic, we have more than 56,000, which are all searchable on our website. So for a total, we have 85,000. But this number can actually be more if we have the updated information on paper-based requests. So I would like to think that we have more than 100,000 FOI requests cumulative since November 2016. Next slide. Okay, this is the breakdown for our data stewards. We often hear from policymakers when they do not like to pass their FOI ordinances or the FOI law that the FOI can be used to harass them. And we tell them that, citizens are smarter than you think. Citizens actually use FOI for what it's meant for. 75% use freedom of information to request for statistics and data sets and for research. And 3% only use FOI for legal documents, and 1% only ask for personal information. So, we inform the senator or the congressman or the vice governor that if they fear FOI will be used to find out where their kids study or what car they use, they actually share it already on social media. Citizens don't need FOI for that already. So FOI, now you see on the right side, FOI is used invalidly. No? Sometimes kasi ginagamit yung FOI for, hold on. All right, sorry for that. 21% actually use FOI to complain, and that's actually a different government service, Doc. It's 8888 and the Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission. No? So that accounts for the 21%. Pero guys, no, I just like to share it on this slide that please do not use FOI to transfer all of your research activities to government. We have received complaints from government institutions that some students actually transfer the bulk load of doing the correlation, doing the cross tabulation to the government agency. So you're supposed to do that, no? You're supposed to do that with your other applications, please, and other process data that the agency already processes regularly. You cannot demand agency to process your data the way you want it. No, they're only required to give you data that they have. So that's one thing. The case is Belgica versus Ochoa. Or who are asking, 29% are from the academe. This includes students, teachers, professors, and researchers. 20% come from government, 11% come from local government, 6% come from CSOs, and only 2% come from the media. So you might be wondering, if FOI was principally established for the media, why don't they use it? The simple answer there, guys, is that the media cannot wait for 15 working days. By that time, the story is stale. So we're seeing that most of our users come from the academe. And then 32% come from others. They did not identify who they are. So they're just the regular citizens. So that's the classification of our eFOI users. Next slide. All right. So just to give you some phases of FOI, I think it's always easier explained when I show you examples of where citizens successfully request for information. On the left side, you see a successful FOI request from our office, PCOO. People were asking of our travel expenditures. When we travel on the expense of the voting public or the tax-paying public. And we disclose that information so that you know where we've been traveling. So most of the time we do just, we cover the president. And so that's when we travel with the president, of course, we have to travel, we have to spend. And so we disclose that information. The slide in the middle is actually quite apropos for National Women's Month last month, March. This lady requested for information about the budgets allocated for gender and development, which is a requirement under the Magna Carta for women, from the Philippine Commission on Women. And the PCW disclosed the information to her, to Ms. Javier. So FOI works. And on the right side, you have a gentleman who requested for information from the DILG, and the DILG disclosed the information. So we do have our success stories. Of course, guys, full disclosure, we also have our unsuccessful stories, and we try to balance that. So sometimes it's denied, but like I mentioned earlier, you can actually appeal. I'm wrapping it up. I'm conscious of time. I've breached the 30 minutes. Next slide, please. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, if you want to learn more about FOI and found my discussion very brief, you can actually enroll on our FOI 101 online course with the Development Academy of the Philippines, Course Bank, and Sparta, which is where I met Doc with the many data science MOOC you have there. So please look for FOI 101 on coursebank.ph. Next slide. We also have a certification course for information officers. So this is primarily for our information officers in government. And we've recently signed the Memorandum of Understanding, and hopefully this rolls out by Q3 of 2021, wherein information officers will have a certification course on FOI, data privacy, records management, and national security, or the classification of documents. And it will be part of the ladderized program of the Master of Public Management. So for our data scientists, data stewards here on dataethics.ph who are in government, that is something to look forward to. Next slide. We have a lot of collaborations with a lot of data scientists. This slide shows you, apart from our friends in Seralytics and Data Ethics PH, we also collaborate with WeSolve. This is the group of Ken Abante, and we work together with him to provide information, more particularly on COVID budgets. We helped them get COVID budget expenditures for 2020 and 2021, so that citizens can track how public monies is spent. And so, yeah, we have partnership with WeSolve. Next slide. This is another platform where I engaged with Doc. We've always been collaborating with the UNDP. On the slide, you see Blue Hodder of the UNDP program. So a couple of years ago, 2019, we've tied up with the UNDP to include FOI on all UNDP DICT free public Wi-Fi spots. And right now, hopefully, with their Pintig Lab project, we'll also see a lot of collaborations. Next slide. And finally, we've also partnered with the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency. And this coming May, we will be having a data rally in terms of where does gender and development budgets of government go to. And we will be having some sort of activity this coming Open Government Week in May 17. Next slide. And that's it, Doc. For more information, please visit our website, foi.gov.ph. We're also on social media. We're FOI Philippines on Facebook, FOI_PH on Twitter, and FOI PH on Instagram. So I hope I was able to share with you FOI and how it can be used by our data scientists and data stewards here on Data Ethics PH. Maraming salamat and good evening, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Usec. No? And it very, very helpful to have all of that information available to our viewers. I think, speaking as a researcher myself, no, talagang there's a term nga we're coining in data ethics called data poverty, which is generally how hard it is to get data. And it is not just limited to government data, even data for business, for strategies, and having structures like the FOI are very helpful, lalo na ngayon na everything's becoming data driven. No? So maybe I want to kick off this latter part, building on the background you've provided. Maybe on a high level, you're certainly a trailblazing unit, as far as making data transparent, and then you also made an interesting distinction, which is helpful for everyone, between proactive and reactive disclosure. I think that's sometimes something that's, I don't know if it's a confusion or maybe people mistake open data for FOI. But can you elaborate a little bit more about that distinction, and what are the best uses for the proactive and what are the best uses for the reactive disclosure, coming from maybe the perspective of a requester, at least from your perspective?
Right. The proactive disclosure became mainstream early 2000s with open data and the open government partnership, which the Philippines is one of the 11 founding members. And it's the practice of government sharing information because, you have a right to it. It's taxpayers' money. And reactive disclosure, or FOI, is much, much older. It started under the U.S. Constitution back in the late 1700s, and then modern FOI was created in 1966 to as a movement against the McCarthy era protective protective government institution. So yun yung development, nagkaroon po tayo ng reactive disclosure muna. then you have people who were protesting and asking, why do we have to ask? Government should actually disclose information already. So you do have proactive disclosure. But then some were saying, is FOI dead after proactive disclosure? And then you see a resurgence of FOI in the early 2010s, because not everything that's proactively disclosed is what people want. And you still need that mechanism, Doc, to you have to empower the citizen to be able to request for information, because of course you don't want to be confined by what government discloses to you, because he might be disclosing only 2 things when he should be disclosing over 10. So the two have to coexist. No, proactive disclosure actually helps reactive disclosure, and vice versa. So reactive disclosure is the mechanism wherein the citizens are empowered to request or demand information from government, and proactive disclosure is the activity of government, volunteering the disclosure of such information. So one does not wipe out or eliminate the other. The two actually help each other. So today, up to the future, I think reactive disclosure and proactive disclosure can coexist and should continue to coexist.
That's great. I noticed you showed earlier na majority of the requests come from the academia. No? Would you have any idea of what's the most common, let's say, thematic, or what's the most common topic requested under FOI, or is there such a a statistic?
Yes, we do. If I could get back to you on that, but I could say that for 2020, FOI requests actually doubled, and most of the requests really centered on COVID-related information, COVID benefits, COVID assistance benefits, COVID assistance requirements, SAP distribution, statistics, what is the spread of SAP in the country. So more or less for 2020, mostly COVID-19 related requests.
Which makes sense, no? Does any particular FOI request come, and not just limited to 2020, come as the most memorable or most interesting in your experience, or was there a particularly I noticed you showed some success stories. Now, was there any one single, I would say, request that you were particularly proud of, no, that the FOI provided?
For me, Doc, no, it's the example I shared kanina, which is the people were requesting for our travel expenses and our travel itinerary for PCOO. Around 3 years ago, I don't know if you know this, but one of my colleagues at PCOO was the famous Mocha Uson. And that's what triggered the FOI request, because she was seen in New York, she was seen in Europe, and people were asking, teka lang, where are you guys going? And the request included all of us officials, not just then ASEC Mocha, who is now OWA Deputy Administrator, but it involved all of us. And I had to share to the requesters, where I've been for that year. And FOI is also useful for us in government because it makes us mindful of what types of information is relevant to you and makes me change my behavior. Since that FOI request, mas naging careful na ako sa mga travels ko. And I said, people are interested pala where I go. And maybe that's, for me, a call or a signal for me to be more mindful of how I spend taxpayers' money. And it made me choose which events to go to and not to go to. And so FOI is not just one way. It doesn't benefit the citizens. It also benefits us in government. It benefits us to make better decisions. It benefits us because it makes us more mindful that whatever we do actually comes at the expense of the Filipino taxpayer. So for me, that has more of a significance kasi naapektuhan talaga yung day-to-day ko.
It's like a moral mandate, no? You mentioned transparency and accountability, no? And direct effect of having information. Um, Obviously, I guess I have to ask this now. How do you deal with kind of the politically motivated requests? You mentioned a term, vexatious requests. I mean, do those come very often, or and what's the normal posture pagdating sa ganun? Or how do you determine if such a request is I don't know, controversial or damaging?
Right. In other countries, they do have policies to address a vexatious request. So a vexatious request is a request that is what you call this defined to harass a government, no, and in other countries they have policies to address this. We have a new policy which we came out this year. An example of a vexatious request is the University of the Philippines, actually in the early days of FOI, received an FOI request asking them ilang butil ng dahon ang meron sa UP Diliman Sunken Garden. I mean, come on, that's a harassment request, and yun yung tinatawag natin na pilosopo na request, Doc. Eh. And so, how do you deny such a request? So we had to come out with such things. Sometimes FOI can also be used to do some fishing expedition, and although FOI can be used to conduct fishing expedition, you know, there is a threshold, no? Once you are going towards data privacy already, then, you know, there has to be some kind of line. We received FOI requests asking for, it's all right to ask for what is the accomplishment of a government official for a particular period. It's another thing to ask what is this other government official doing with another government official, insinuating some kind of illegal relationship. That's another example of a vexatious request. So those types of things, requests. With another agency, FDA, received the same request over and over and over. So they were asking, the requester was asking for information regarding an application for a particular drug, and the requester requested the same request multiple times. And of course, this already, you know, disrupts or fills or creates a backlog for the agency. So those types of things, Doc, we have to address. And that's why we have a policy on vexatious requests. But so what happens there is, if a request is considered vexatious based on the definitions we made, then the request can be denied, or the government agency is given an opportunity to ask from the requester, can you please be serious with your request? And if the requester disagrees, then there's a remedy naman you can appeal. But suffice to say, Doc, that, you know, I hope this is an opportunity for us to share with you that in government we also, you know, get this kind of vexatious request, no? Hindi naman lahat mga data scientists na matitino yung request eh. Meron din kami mga pilosopo, and we have to address that.
Then, like the nuisance requests, no, and that bogs down the system, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure you guys have that also in the data science world.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'll say this, no, it's not it's not correlated with credentials or intelligence. No, you get a lot of interesting arguments, sometimes from rather intelligent people. Anyway, that would be a digression. Yeah, let's talk about that. No, well, clearly this is a good step forward for FOI to engage the data science community. I'm sure a number of data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, are watching. No, maybe top of mind, what would ideally, what would be your wish list? No, how would you like the data science community to engage with FOI? No, or how can we best help FOI?
Oh yes, we need a lot of help from you guys, no? We in government, I would admit, no, I'll be speaking for myself, but you know, being in government, majority of my career, we are what, 10 years behind you guys in the private sector in terms of data science, and we need your help to educate my colleagues here in government on you know, how to improve our data collection and data management, data records management. We have recently drafted an electronic records management policy with the National Archives and the DICT. And we're about to roll that out here this coming Q2. But can you imagine? It's 2021 na, and government is just now releasing an electronic records management policy when it should have been done 10 years ago. And so, that explains, Doc, on why when you do use FOI, and I will have to admit this, is that a lot of the information that when we disclose it to you, you can't use it because it's in PDF. And, we need your help, no? That's why we want to partner with your group. Hopefully, come up with this sort of introduction to data stewardship to our information officers. This is not the time and place, but hopefully later on this year, we'll be able to come up with that, because we really need to improve the way, because FOI is just a front-facing program. It doesn't matter how good our website is if what we produce, what government agencies produce, is something that you guys can't use. My product is useless. So we need to fix the back end. That's why we're reaching out to the National Archives and trying to educate our government agencies, to collect it properly. Use Excel, use CSV for data sets, and not, start scanning it on PDF and then sharing it, and then having you guys have to do the same work. Inuulit nyo lang eh. So, and what? We have over 500 government agencies, and we simply cannot do it by ourselves. No? So we need the help for you guys when we conduct hackathons, or we can conduct webinars, and we can start them, little by little. We can concentrate with the agencies that you ask information from most of the time, and make sure that, we have a data science community from our end that keeps up with your side. So that's what we need. It's useless if I have a FOI and you can't use the information that we disclose.
Yeah, I suspect that's maybe a remnant, no, maybe an older culture. Diba dati, long before electronic media, the traditional way to archive is microfilm, no? So, or photocopies. And then when you say data warehousing, it's physical warehousing of endless stacks of paper na hopefully hindi dagain, no? While it's in storage. I mean, I'm sure, you're a relatively young agency, no? Can you comment on maybe the culture of the government regarding data, and how has it changed, or if it has changed at all, no, during your period, building this FOI initiative?
Yes. Yes, Doc. No? So one thing kanina, we all mentioned is, what you mentioned is that, a lot of us in government, no, still come from the analog days or analog era na talagang stuck sa paper documents. And then yung pinaka-progress dun is scanning already, pero PDF, and then that's it. They've already electronically stored the data. But a lot of things have advanced since then. But another issue, aside from having this mindset that we're still in the analog era, is the fact that a lot of information officers and records officers in government, get rolled over plenty of times. And that's what we've experienced for the past 5 years, Doc. I mean, the people we've trained in 2017 in an agency are not the same people already. So we have to retrain them. And it's maybe because, those in power, the authorities, don't really give emphasis on information officers in the agency. And they feel that, we can roll over these things. Parang medyo mababaw yung tingin nila sa information officers. And most of our information officers are contract of service. They're not even a regular plantilla. That's why they're easily replaced. And that's the reason why we also came up with the certification course to elevate the level of competency of our information officers, to shout out to people that, information record keeping is actually a profession. It's, it requires skill. You can't just put any Tom, Dick, and Harry there and then expect them to understand, how to balance right to information and data privacy, and, not commit mistakes that, disclosing all of these information that should not be disclosed. So yeah, so those are the struggles I've seen, you know. So number one, not prioritizing information officers, and you know and that's why they're rolled over. And so hopefully our solution to that is to level up and make them seen as professionals, and hopefully make them more of a mainstay in their area.
Yeah, I think I have an interesting piece of trivia. No? So you're familiar with the Sparta project, Sparta program. One of the pathways in Sparta is data stewards, no? And actually, outside of Sparta, you're the only person who actually mentions that term. I haven't met anyone mention it.
What
Uh,
term? What
yung
term?
data steward.
Ah,
And in Sparta, that's also the least popular pathway. Karamihan want to be a data analyst, data scientist, data engineer. And I was telling the OST in one of our conversations na if there is a role or a pathway that's quite appropriate by default to any government employee, it would be data steward. And I think that the fact na kokonti lang nag-enroll is I think an opportunity for us, no, to evangelize and spread the word. Na data stewardship is a career, no, because you're already a data steward by default, and it's good that you have a certification for FOI there. Maybe we can combine that, no, with the data steward pathway sa Sparta, para ma-educate din sila on the value of data. Kasi yun nga, I mean, for if people don't use the data, then they won't know how difficult it is pala by just giving it to someone in PDF form or, God forbid, photocopy form. Uh, you have to re-encode the damn thing, no? Talagang hirap na hirap. Okay. I'm just being conscious about our time limit. Can I just ask you two more things? No, one is, so the FOI, which is by my lens, a fantastic initiative. What are the near term, I would say, milestones that you would like, to hit, no, for FOI, in conjunction with getting data people to to help out, and then the second would be, if you have a few takeaways you want to leave the audience with, no, what would those be, regarding FOI and your mission?
yeah, we really want to tie up with the DICT in terms of open data, no, and link with them. We were able to link with the DICT when the officer in charge back then was Undersecretary Dennis Villorente. And right now, the focus is different, but we already reached out to them that we really like to link FOI and open data because they help each other out. Diba? Open data is proactive disclosure, FOI is reactive disclosure. Simpleng pag-link lang naman ng data.gov.ph, foi.gov.ph would be really helpful for a lot of you na data scientists and data stewards and data researchers, diba? It's all in one website already. And so for me, my wish list is most, if not all, government agencies be on our FOI website. I hope that the constitutional commissions, Congress, the judiciary also join the FOI program. My wish list in the private sector and CSOs and other organizations, Doc, is for you to use FOI. It's very difficult for us to justify continuation of the program if people don't use it. And right now, most of our users are students. And that's why I've reached out to Analytics and Data Ethics PH and to your community, because now I want to reach out to data scientists. Please use FOI to request for data sets from government. And if they respond to you and they respond to you with errors, please inform us at FOI Philippines. No, we're here as conduits, as mediums to help. Sometimes kasi hindi lang nila naintindihan kung ano yung hinihingi ninyo, and kami na po ang magta-translate sa kanila. So please use the program. And of course, there's still kinks. No, hindi siya completely foolproof. And if you hit the obstacle or hit the snag, inform us and we'll try to sort things out, because we are already friends with, we've already built an FOI community of practitioners in government side. We've trained more than 4,000 FOI information officers, and all they need is some guidance, and we're in between. So, we also deal with you in the private sector, the general public. So please, I cannot justify to DBM, to the Office of the President, that FOI is a useful program if you don't use it. And hopefully this year of 2021 leading up to 2022, we see more data stewards, data scientists, data researchers use FOI, for innovation. And, my goal is to have a success story. Most of my success stories come from students, and I'd like to have a success story coming from a data scientist. So that's it, Doc. Thanks so much for the time. I think I'll be answering questions during the Q&A.
Yeah. So I'll also, in a way, want to thank you for giving us a really, really comprehensive background on FOI. And I can tell you, we've been witness to innovation where open data is possible. No, like in March, we judged the BARM data challenge, and the root of that data challenge was just the availability of an open data set, no, for Bangsamoro. It's not even a new one, no? It was circa 2017 pa, and when it was open to the public, people came in and enriched that data, and then now solutions that can contribute not just to economic empowerment and betterment of society in the BARM, but actually can further the peace process lalo, no? Is there, no? And if it can work in that small constrained space, no? What more pa if we can unlock it for the rest of the country, no? Related to it. Okay, so yeah, so we have to save some for the next podcast, but I'd like to thank you, Usec, for coming to Data Ethics, and hope to have you again in a near date where we can talk about more initiatives now related to FOI and open data and innovation.
Thanks so much, Doc. Good evening, everyone.